In a church in France in 1956, a priest is preparing for a worship ceremony. He asks a boy to fetch the sacramental wine. The boy goes to the storage room to get the wine, but the wine bottle suddenly explodes. He quickly reports back to the priest, and they both think there might be an intruder. They go outside to investigate, only to find that the holy water in the baptismal font has evaporated. The ghost nun hides behind a white mist, and then the priest is struck as if by a heavy blow, floating into the air and self-immolating. And this murder is just the beginning. In a girls' school in Paris, a delivery man goes to deliver goods to a janitor and witnesses the janitor being possessed by the ghost nun, resulting in his immediate death. It is worth noting that before this place was converted into a school, it was a convent. This news quickly spreads to various parishes, and Vatican researchers, in their quest for the truth, find the former demon hunter Sister Irene. They also receive other bad news. Priests and nuns are dying mysteriously throughout Europe. The rampage of the evil spirit crosses Europe to the west, but the starting point is traced back to Romania. In order to prevent more casualties, the bishops and others hope that Irene can investigate the truth and understand the nuns' motives and actions. Irene does not want to get involved in matters of evil spirits, but the bishop's orders are hard to disobey. She can only reluctantly board the train to France alone. Sister Debra secretly follows her, wanting to help Irene find the truth together. As the train speeds towards its destination, another incident occurs at the girls' school. Several students bully Sophie, the teacher's daughter, and lure her to an abandoned church to play a game. The lead girl instructs Sophie to stand in front of a stained glass depicting a goat and explains that at a specific time, sunlight will refract through the glass at the right angle. If you stare directly at the painted goat during this time, it will make eye contact with you. Once you look away, the demon will transform into a monster goat. After the girl finishes speaking, she leaves with her friends. Sophie sees the eyes of the goat emitting red light. The girl turns around and runs, but the mean students lock the door. Suddenly, a statue of a nun on one side rises. In the nick of time, Maurice arrives, opens the door, and takes Sophie out of the abandoned church. The mean girls quickly flee. Just as Maurice is about to ask if Sophie is okay, her mother arrives and takes her away because it's time for class. As evening approaches, Irene arrives at the French church to investigate the recent incident of the priest self-immolating. The burnt traces still linger on the steps, indicating the horrifying scene at that time. Irene looks up at the mural, noticing ashes drifting in the air. While gazing at the priest's charred corpse, she is shocked. Suddenly, the door behind her opens, and the boy from that day walks up to Irene, handing her the rose gold rosary left by the priest. Before Irene can take it, Debra interrupts her thoughts, and the visions from earlier disappear. Irene asks a local nun if there was a boy present at the scene on the day of the incident. The nun confirms that the boy witnessed the entire process of the priest's death, but mentions that the boy's mother is very secretive about it. The nun suggests Irene to look for the boy in the streets. She also mentions that on the day of the incident, there was another worker in the church, but he resigned the next day. The worker loved traveling, and the nun is unaware of his whereabouts, only knowing that he recently returned from Romania. Hearing this, Irene immediately thinks of Maurice, the man who saved her life years ago during a confrontation with a demon at Karata Monastery. Maurice is a travel enthusiast. Irene realizes that the ghost nun likely attached itself to Maurice. Wherever he goes, accidents seem to follow. Meanwhile, Maurice is busy at the school, taking care of his small tomato plants, the seeds of which were given to him by Irene. Sophie's mother approaches him to express gratitude, having learned about the bullying incident involving her daughter. Through their conversation, it becomes evident that the reason the school principal sealed off the abandoned church is that his son died inside during an air raid. Their discussion is intense, and Sophie sits by the window eavesdropping. She secretly hopes her mother will marry Maurice, and her mother, aware of Sophie's thoughts, warns her not to eavesdrop and then goes back to the classroom. Sophie turns to observe Maurice. She notices his strange behavior. She hears her mother calling her name and immediately follows her mother upstairs. Sophie cautiously opens the door, only to find the ghost nun standing right in front of her. In the next moment, countless crows swarm in, and Sophie hurriedly runs downstairs. Fortunately, her mother opens the door at that moment, causing the ghostly nun to disappear into the wall. It seems Irene's speculation was correct. The ghost nun has indeed been hiding in the girls' school with Maurice. At this point, Irene and Debra decide to stay at a hotel. Just as they arrive, boys rushes past, and Irene immediately recognizes the boy she's been looking for. She wants to inquire about the whereabouts of the rosary but finds the boy chasing a ball into an alley. Irene hastens to catch up, but the boys vanish around a corner. Just when she is unsure of what to do, end up at a newsstand. Magazines flip open, revealing illustrations that gradually form a familiar figure. Uncontrollably drawn towards the magazines, Irene is suddenly grabbed by the throat. She is dragged into a wooded area, where a man in red extracts the eyes of a nun. The nun holds a precious box, kneeling before Irene. When Debra discovers the main character lying unconscious, Irene has just witnessed the execution scene of a nun, likely Saint Lucy. Legend has it that this nun was subjected to burning by non-believers, but her body wouldn't catch fire. Helpless, the non-believers had to resort to gouging out her eyes. Why Irene sees this scene is unclear. Meanwhile, in the girls' school, the principal hears strange noises in the hallway. Goes to inspect the doors and windows, only to find Maurice standing in the shadows. Maurice looks terrified, with a vacant gaze. The principal urges him to go back and rest, advising against wandering around the school late at night. The sound of the boy's voice echoes from the abandoned church. The principal summons the courage to investigate. Finds an apparition resembling his son. Desperate to trace the figure, even if it's a ghost, wants to see his son again. Unbeknownst to him, the ghost nun stands behind the boy, controlling him to hurl a heavy object toward the principal. Woman meets her end at the burial site of her son. Irene regains consciousness. She remembers the visions from the previous day and speculates that the ghost nun's purpose is to obtain the precious box left by Saint Lucy. Debra informs Irene that the boy had recently delivered a rose gold rosary with a familiar symbol on it. Similar symbols have been found on rosaries of other victims, and the two must investigate its meaning. Irene takes the rosary to the Catholic Church archives, and the librarian quickly recognizes the symbol on the rosary. It's the family crest of Saint Lucy. It appears that the recently murdered priests and nuns are all descendants of Saint Lucy, who are believed to be guarding their ancestors' eyes. If Irene's guess is correct, the eyes in the box are Saint Lucy's, but why does the ghost nun want them? The librarian speculates that the ghost nun might be a fallen angel deprived of power, and he was present at the scene of Saint Lucy's torture. He knows that those eyes possess the divine power granted by God to saints, and he wants to take it for himself. The librarian retrieves a catalogue of registered holy items and finds that the eyes are buried in St. Mary's Convent, just an hour's drive away. However, the convent has been converted into a girls' boarding school. Irene must find the eyes before the ghost nun and use their power to send her back to hell. Meanwhile, in the girls' boarding school, Sophie's mother discovers the principal's body and quickly reports the incident to the authorities. The school is in chaos due to the unexpected event, and Sophie is particularly anxious and fearful. Fortunately, Maurice and her mother are by her side for support. As Irene gets closer, Maurice becomes weaker and even too feeble to stand. Sophie's mother tries to approach and help him, but she notices an inverted cross mark on his skin. At this moment, the ghost nun silently leaves Maurice and hides in a decorative painting on the wall. Seeing this, Maurice quickly grabs the mother and daughter and escapes. They coincidentally encounter Irene, who reveals the truth: the ghost nun has been hiding inside Maurice. As Irene speaks, Maurice's bones start cracking, as if something is trying to burrow back into his body. Irene rushes towards the possessed Maurice, but he exhibits tremendous strength, knocking both her and Debra down. Thankfully, Irene quickly uses the rosary to cast a spell, immobilizing Maurice. Debra, seeing this, knocks him unconscious with a stick and securely ties him up. However, this method won't hold for long, so Irene and Debra need to find the eyes as soon as possible. They enter the abandoned church, but the vast space inside leaves them unsure where to begin their search. Sophie points to the stained glass, recounting the legend the girls talked about earlier. However, it's midnight, and there is no sunlight to illuminate the dark side of the window. Using a flashlight as a makeshift sunlight, she adjusts the angle until the goat's eyes emit red light, landing on the floor. She immediately pries open the movable floorboard and starts digging for the precious box. Meanwhile, Maurice manages to free himself. Sophie notices that the painted goat on the window is gone and recalls the demon transformation. After Irene digs out St. Lucy's eyes, however, on the way, they encounter a frightened little girl who claims there's someone upstairs. Debra, holding a flashlight, inspects the stairs and discovers a goat-like monster. She quickly rushes upstairs, taking the girl to hide in the dormitory. They desperately barricade the door as the monster's roars pierce through the thin wooden door. The commotion wakes up all the girls in the dormitory, huddling together in fear. The next moment, the girls uncontrollably crash into everything around them. Sophie's mother wants to check on the children, but Maurice, in a sudden burst, knocks her aside. He then rushes towards Irene and smashes her head against the ground. The little girl seizes the opportunity to grab the box and escape. Seeing this, Maurice releases Irene and turns to chase after Sophie. Meanwhile, Debra hides with the children in the shadows. One of the girls knows a secret passage to the principal's office because she once played a prank by releasing cockroaches into it. As the girl tries to crawl halfway through, she sees the principal standing in front of her. The principal reaches out and pulls her back into the secret passage. Debra and the others tightly hold on to the lower half of the girl's body and pull her out. Also brings out the principal. In a panic, everyone rushes out of the room. Sophie hides in the attic with the box, but Maurice quickly catches up. Sophie clutches the box in fear, and the saintly eyes inside seem to respond, emitting a faint glow. Maurice is stung by the light. Sophie tries to climb out of the attic, but the entire building begins to collapse. Maurice follows closely, and she can only run forward with her head down. Irene sees the attic collapse and understands that it's the power of the saintly eyes. Meanwhile, Sophie's hiding spot collapses, and Maurice grabs her ankle amidst the chaos. In this critical moment, Maurice's wrench slips from his hand, and he tumbles into the debris. Sophie manages to climb to the attic and catch her breath. She hears Irene's shout and quickly rushes to join her. Sophie hands the box to Irene, raising the box and immobilizing Maurice. The power of the saintly eyes proves potent, but Maurice's physical body is inevitably damaged, and he might not survive much longer. Black blood oozes from his 7 orifices, and he collapses on the ground. Irene approaches Maurice and he is only feigning death. He grabs Irene's hand. Debra rushes forward to help, but it's too late. Maurice absorbs the saintly eyes, and the ghost nun finally materializes from behind him. She uses an iron chain to strangle Debra. On the other side, students once again encounter the goat monster. Irene momentarily panics, and she is accidentally kicked into the air by the ghost nun. Her skirt catches fire, and she is on the verge of being burned alive. Irene screams in agony, but her mother's voice suddenly resonates in her ears, unlocking some suppressed memories. Irene realizes that she is also a descendant of St. Lucy. Irene breaks free from control and falls to the ground. The ghost nun, furious to make wooden spikes emerge from the ground, and wine flows everywhere. Irene and others are trapped by the wooden spikes. Maurice, seemingly regaining his sanity, is about to charge towards Sophie, but at the critical moment, he appears to regain his senses. And Irene and Sophie place their hands in the wine. Their priest had once said that if they truly believed in their faith, they could turn the wine into the holy blood of Jesus. Indeed, their power transforms the wine, and the red liquid explodes around the ghost nun, reducing her to ashes. At the same time, the goat monster also disappears. Irene repays Maurice for saving her life by helping him rid his body of the lingering evil.